This is a real strange piece of wood. I think I can make something of this, but we don't know until we try. What I'm thinking of doing, because this is flat on the table, that's not the way I want it in the pressure pot. However, when I cut it, I can take this piece and flip it on top so that that part goes on here. So that might actually work. Well, let me try that. I think this might work. Well, I'm going to round this off and try and get it to fit into the pot. Well, I think I'll take a little bit more off so that it fits in nicely. Forced in a little bit here. So a little bit of bark to come off here and to clean up this. That's going to be quite interesting. I thoroughly sprayed the inside of my casting pail with some mold release. I'm not sure you need to get this brand name. I think some people use Pam spray on there and others just use a floor wax to put inside. I think they all work. It's time to mix the resin. And of course, I'm using designer epoxy product. It's called Deep Casting. I've never had a problem with this stuff. I've been able to pour about 10 inches, sometimes 11 inches without cracking. Of course, I'm using a vacuum chamber and I'm using a pressure pot as well. So the color I'm going to use today is called Copper Brown. I've used this before on an urn, and it got beautiful swirls of black in it. I hope it has the same on this. I'm also going to put in some hypershift. This is gold, green, green, orange, red. This product is meant to give a sheen to the epoxy, and when you move it in different directions, the light hits at different angles and it causes it to change color slightly. So I'll see how that works out. One of the keys that I believe in using this stuff is to have a lot of it in there. Don't skimp on the powder. Okay, so that's 5. I think these are half teaspoons. Well, then let me do 6, so it'll be 3 full teaspoons. When you concentrate the color a lot, you also are able to turn the piece much thinner and still have the epoxy color. If you don't have enough product in the epoxy, it washes out when you get quite thin. 1, 2, 3. These are both available from designerepoxy.ca. This could be messy work, so always wear some gloves. And if you have a lot of allergies, it might be a good idea to wear a respirator too. There's no unpleasant fumes from this product. Looks like we're going to need at least 3 of those. Now to make my trusty topper. That one's ready-made with a specialized technical weight on it. It's called a rock. I'm going to need several technical weights on that to hold it down. I'm going to go get some more. I think that'll hold it. Now for the vacuum chamber. My pressure pot doubles as a vacuum chamber. I just put a seal on the lip of the pot and a 1-inch thick acrylic top, and I have a vacuum chamber. All you need to do is hand tighten the top down, as the vacuum pressure makes the seal more complete. A lot of air got introduced to the resin with the mixing process, especially with that drill. Those bubbles are the air that's coming out of the resin. I also believe that it's pulling air out of the wood. And I think that wood is pretty soft. That's the feeling I got when I used the wire brush on it. So there's going to be a fair amount of air in that wood that the vacuum chamber is going to be drawing out. The vacuum is pretty much at the full strength of my vacuum pump, which generally runs on my gauge at the lathe, runs about 27.5 inches. This is a couple of inches out. The gauge on the vacuum chamber is a couple of inches out. I don't want those bubbles to overflow the pail because that'll mess up my vacuum / pressure pot. It took 35 minutes to get most of the bubbles out, and I left it in the pot for an additional hour and a half just to make sure. The pressure pot lid needs to be tightened down significantly, more so than the vacuum chamber lid. After 3 days in the pressure pot, I now have the casting out, the bottom turned, and a waste block and face plate attached. Casting will be reversed on the lathe, and I can start truing up the rest of the sides and start shaping. I should also mention that I did part off the top of the casting to create a more shallow bowl. Change the camera angle to get a better view of the bottom. The shaking that you see is mainly from the camera and not the lathe. Due to the amount of resin in the piece, I use Hunter Tools carbide-tipped tools a lot. They are one of my sponsors, but I have used Mike's tools for years, and they are the best choice for working with resin. However, I still use regular high-speed steel for the finishing shaping and for some of the finesse work. You can see some tear out in the resin or chips that are taken out of it. This is from being too aggressive with the carbide tools. I need to turn down the piece to get rid of these. This will necessitate me using several bowl gouges as they dull quickly, but after the project is done, it'll only take 5 or 10 minutes to resharpen all of them. Final shaping is done with a negative rig scraper with a freshly sharpened edge. When done well, the sharpening process will leave a uniform burr, which does a wonderful job of the final scraping process. There were a few chips in the lid, so I needed to turn that down a bit. I started sanding at 120 grit and moved all the way up to 1500. The final process is denatured alcohol to remove any dust on the surface. Then I use a buffing wheel, which is loaded with a buffing compound. I reversed the camera angle to finish the inside of the bowl. Measuring and drilling a hole to the bottom of the piece allows for faster and more accurate work. Putting wax on the bit also helps make the work easier. So once again, thank you for your past support. I hope to have a video out every week, and I would sure like to have you watching them. As you have seen, almost half of the work involved in finishing a piece is actually the prep work. That includes choosing the wood, cutting it to size, cleaning it, mixing and pouring the resin, the vacuum and pressure processes, and this is all before it even gets on the lathe. To finish the bottom of the bowl, I need to reverse the bowl and attach the inside to a vacuum chuck. This process centers the bowl, and the vacuum holds it on while I turn away the waste block and clean up the bottom. This is gorgeous. Another trick you can do with this first coat is you can cut it 10% with mineral spirits, and that'll help it soak in a little bit more on the first coat, maybe even the second coat if you want. I don't believe this finish is soaking into the resin, but it is in the wood. The trick to this is to saturate the wood as much as you can, and after 5-10 minutes, wipe off as much as you can. Obviously, I think you'll be wiping off just about everything off of the resin, but somehow it soaks into the wood, and when it dries overnight and you repeat the process and do that 3 or 4 days in a row, you get a superb finish. After 3 or 4 coats or 5 or 6 coats, your finish looks just as brilliant as this does when it's wet. When I rub the finish off now, it's going to look duller, but after 4 coats, maybe 5 coats, it'll come back to this. This finish was pioneered by a high-end craftsman called Sam Maloof out of California. And he said that he applied this finish with jute, or the same stuff potato sacks are made out of. He would rub it extremely hard when he was taking the coats off, and he said he thought that that caused some friction, and that little bit of heat helped the finish to set up. It's been my experience that the more you can rub off, the next coat just pops. When I release the vacuum, I can remove the bowl. Wow. This is amazing. Here's the finished dish. This is beautiful birch burl. And the colors in the resin are pretty nice too. 10 inches in diameter and 4 inches in depth. The figure from the birch burl is really eye-catching, and the dark copper resin complements the wood. I like the size of this piece. It's art and yet still functional for fruit or snacks.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. Doesn't matter if my beard is gray. Just listen, I have something to say.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. And this old goat has something to say. So just keep learning from Grandpa Dennis's turning.